Is Rob Bolden. I'm the Director of Artistic Operations for Pittsburgh Opera, and on behalf of all of us, a few of us who are here, thank you so much for coming out today, or those of you who are at the service for sticking around. We are really excited to be able to present this lecture today. We're actually thrilled to be able to present this piece, Curlew River by Benjamin Britten, long on Christopher Hahn's wish list, our General Director, and finally we were able to get it programmed, and we are thrilled that it's going to take place here in Calvary Episcopal. It is meant to be set in an Anglican church, and we couldn't have been more thrilled when all of the dates and the logistics worked out. So on behalf of all of us at Pittsburgh Opera, we extend our gratitude to the staff and the clergy here at Calvary for opening up your doors and your space to us. It's no small feat to transform this space into a theater space, but we are really appreciative of the warmth and all of the logistics that go into this, and so we thank you very much. Preceding the performances and the production, we're excited today to be able to present this lecture with Ryan Prendergast, Assistant Teaching Professor of Musicology at Carnegie Mellon University. Ryan and I have known each other for a little while, and we had coffee several months back, and he happened to say to me, well, you know, Curlew River doesn't come around very often, and I teach a course on contemporary opera, so I'm basing my course on Curlew River. And I said, interesting, would you like to do a lecture for us at the opera? And he wonderfully agreed, so we are really thrilled to be able to invite him into this space and into our world to provide some background, some history, some context of this piece in advance of the performances coming up next week. So Ryan has a lecture prepared that he is going to deliver scholarly, no doubt, and then at the end of it, Christopher Hahn, and he will have a brief conversation, maybe some repartee back and forth about the piece, about Christopher's views on it. And then if there are questions from all of you, you can get those ready, and if we have a little time at the end, we can open it up to a few questions. So without further ado, I will hand over to Ryan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rob. Am I audible sufficiently? Good. My thanks to the leadership of Pittsburgh Opera and Calvary Episcopal Church for making this talk possible today. But now, good souls, let us leave these environs for an ecclesiastical setting of a different kind. Our scene is the Suffolk coast in the east of England in June 1964. The coastal town of Aldeburgh and the normally sleepy hamlets around it swell yet again with activity for an annual summer arts festival. Inside the 14th century church of St. Bartholomew in the nearby village of Orford, an audience gathers on the evening of June 13th for one of the most anticipated premieres of the entire summer. It is a new work, a so-called church parable, written by the composer at the helm of the entire operation. The mood inside the church is restive, not least because a thunderstorm knocked out the electricity and delayed the 9 o'clock start by 1 more hour. Rumor about this new piece contributes to the buzz. It'll be some type of Japanese drama. It's a strange style of music, and gasp, the main role is played by one of the nation's most celebrated tenors in drag. Now, when the performance begins, a series of marvels appear. Some 24 performers, vocalists and instrumentalists alike, enter dressed as monks, chanting the Latin hymn for Compline. Without a conductor in sight and in a heightened musical style, the group proceeds to tell a strange tale from long ago, a mystery, the monks tell us, a sign of God's good grace. The setting for this play within a play is the fictional Curlew River, named for the long-beaked marshland bird. Now, in the story, a group of pilgrims crosses the Curlew on a ferry to reach a grave on the other side that is the site of miracles. Among their number is the ferryman, a solitary traveler, and a distraught madwoman, that tenor I mentioned, indeed, in a strange mask and wig, plaintively searching for her abducted son. Now, once the ferry crosses the river, the mad woman discovers that it is her missing child who is buried at the fabled shrine, and she falls into a frenzy of grief. As the group prays, the spirit of the boy appears, and his disembodied voice assures the mad woman that their souls will reunite in heaven. She is thus purified of her madness. The mystery ends, the monks recess, and the piece is over. Now, as you may glean from this description, Curlew River, with music by Benjamin Britten and a libretto by William Plumer, is no ordinary musical drama, to say the least. On the one hand, austere and direct, and on the other, abstract and highly stylized. As the mad woman herself observes in the piece, all is clear, but unclear too. As much as they might intimidate, the peculiarities of the work should not discourage. In Curlew River, as well as the two later church parables, The Burning Fiery Furnace from 1966 and The Prodigal Son from 1968, Britten and Plumer explored new dramatic and musical forms that offered thrilling possibilities rarely seen in conventional opera. Part of the charm is in the provocation, by just asking what Curlew River is about and whether or not it is even an opera. We fuel its innovations further. Today, my introduction will examine the genesis of Curlew River, its construction, and its wider significance amid Benjamin Britten's work and legacy. I reach into the letters and writings of Britten, Plumer, and their collaborators to help us conjure up the circuitous but exciting 8 years it took for this work to go from conception to premiere. Just as the pilgrims exhort the mad woman to sing, "Mad woman, sing," so we may exhort Curlew River to yield its secrets as we cross its enigmatic waves. Now, Britten's inspiration for Curlew River came during a tour of Asia in late 1955 and early 1956 with his partner Peter Pears. Britten relayed these anecdotes in his program note for Curlew River, and it is worth quoting in full. "It was in Tokyo in January 1956 that I saw a no drama for the first time, and I was lucky enough during my brief stay there to see 2 different performances of the same play, Sumidagawa. The whole occasion made a tremendous impression upon me. The simple, touching story, the economy of the style, the intense slowness of the action, the marvelous skill and control of the performers, the beautiful costumes, the mixing of chanting, speech, singing, which with the 3 instruments made up the strange music. It all offered a totally new operatic experience. There was no conductor. The instrumentalists sat on the stage, so did the chorus, and the chief characters made their entrance down a long ramp. The lighting was strictly non-theatrical. The cast was all male, the one female character wearing an exquisite mask which made no attempt to hide the male jowl beneath it." And Britten goes on, "The memory of this play has seldom left my mind in the years since. Was there not something, many things to be learnt from it? The solemn dedication and skill of the performers were a lesson to any singer or actor of any country and any language. Was it not possible to use just such a story, the simple one of a demented mother seeking her lost child, with an English background? For there was no question in any case of a pastiche from the ancient Japanese. Surely the medieval religious drama in England would have had a comparable setting, an all-male cast of ecclesiastics, a simple, austere staging in a church, a very limited instrumental accompaniment, a moral story. And so we came from Sumidagawa to Curlew River and a church in the Fens, but with the same story and similar characters. And whereas in Tokyo, the music was the ancient Japanese music jealously preserved by successive generations, here I have started the work with that wonderful plain-song hymn, Te lucis ante terminum, and from it the whole piece may be said to have grown. And there is nothing specifically Japanese left in our parable, but if we on the stage and you in the audience can achieve half the intensity and concentration of that original drama, I shall be happy. Now, as stimulating as Britten's account is, a few qualifications are necessary. We may turn to Britten and Pears's travel companions on that trip, Prince Ludwig of Hesse and his wife Margaret, for more context. Britten's hosts in Tokyo, the family of Hiroshi Kurosawa, did take the group to the Sudobashi No Theater on February 11th to see Sumidagawa, or the Sumida River, written by No actor and playwright Motomasa. The account in Prince Ludwig's diary is worth quoting at length too, though his private thoughts do exhibit a Westerner's condescending perspective. The beginning of one of the plays we watch is so strange and unreal that one wants to burst out laughing at this deadly serious gibberish. But once one can follow the sense of scene and words through the translations our friends brought for us, one becomes more and more interested, fascinated, moved by this completely stylized art. We cannot say how this effect is possible, but we become aware of being impressed as only good art impresses. And indeed, the play impressed Britten sufficiently for him to return to see Sumidagawa again on February 19th. And at some point, he secured a reel-to-reel audio recording of the play, which is still part of his personal archive. He also secured a series of ethnographic albums from Columbia Records featuring the court music of Japan, known as gagaku, which he heard during his stay. Britten even acquired a Japanese sho, a type of mouth organ that fascinated him, and he received rudimentary training on it from the Kurosawa family. And it should be said that Britten was not encountering these cultures of music and dance for the first time. He was already familiar with No drama, a highly ritualized style of theater with spiritual emphasis, since the late 1930s via Ezra Pound's translations. And in fact, Britten once helped arrange for a gong player to accompany one of Pound's dramatic readings. And the No-inspired plays of William Butler Yeats cannot be ruled out as well. Moreover, Britten's broader exposure to Asian music began during his time in the United States between 1939 and 1942 with the gamelan transcriptions of composer Colin McPhee. Equally momentous was the influence of William Plumer, Britten's librettist for the opera Gloriana and all the church parables. The South African-born Plumer had lived in Japan for several years during the 1930s as a foreign correspondent, and he strongly recommended that Britten experience as much Japanese theater as possible on his trip. Now, after Britten's return from Japan, his correspondence with Plumer immediately turned to how Sumidagawa, a work which the librettist also admired, could be adapted into a viable libretto for a musical work to be produced by Britten's English opera group at the Aldeburgh Festival. A small snag emerged, however, when Plumer made Britten aware of another opera adaptation of Sumidagawa composed by an older British contemporary, Clarence Raybould. First performed in 1916, Raybould's work has since fallen into obscurity. Now, Britten knew Raybould as a conductor, but he waved any concerns away, telling Plumer, "Actually, I didn't know that Raybould even composed, but don't let it worry us. What a funny coincidence." Initially, Britten only wished Plumer to provide him with a translation of Sumidagawa to be set to music, but the librettist was concerned that the project would easily topple over into Orientalist pastiche. They spent the better part of 3 years exchanging various drafts for revision. And meanwhile, Britten directed his attention towards other commissions and projects, among them The Prince of the Pagodas, a ballet inspired by the time Britten spent in Bali before his weeks in Japan, Noah's Flood, another medieval adaptation for amateurs, first performed at the same church as the Parables in 1958, and notably the opera A Midsummer Night's Dream in 1960. Now, in April 1959, the Curlew Project took a major leap forward when Britten proposed to Plumer that the piece not be presented in a conventional theater, but rather at one of the smaller churches around Aldeburgh. He also suggested that the story be Christianized and that the location be shifted to another setting, possibly near Aldeburgh, again in the region of East Anglia. And these shifts were not trivial, as Britten was to acknowledge. Positioning the new work as a pseudo-liturgical drama provided an analog for how No plays were ancient texts performed in the present. And activating medieval theatrical conventions would also stave off the work becoming a No pastiche, and it would afford them explanations for an all-male cast and the use of ancient ritual Latin texts. Most significantly, the concept allowed for a more cathartic ending than the original Sumidagawa, in which the mother sees the spirit of her child but cannot communicate with or embrace him, leaving her without any closure or ostensible redemption. Now, further projects, including the epic War Requiem, delayed Britten's full attention to the score of Curlew River until January 1964. He and peers then took an extended holiday to Venice so Britten could begin composition. And the composer wrote to his musical associate Donald Mitchell from his Palazzo lodgings, just as news of the project was beginning to leak out in the British press, along with a rejected title, Across the River. Britten told Mitchell, "It was hellishly hard to start with. I found I was tireder than I thought, and I wasn't so well prepared to start with as I would like to have been. However, it is going faster now, and I'm just across the river. Actually, the Times jumped the gun. There is no title so far, and certainly not Across the River. Apart from finding the right notes, and because there are so few of them, it seems harder than ever. One of the problems is how to write it down, there being no conductor, and the tempo is a kind of controlled floating." Now, after returning to England that February, Britten finished the score of Curlew River in Aldeburgh on Maundy Thursday, March 26, 1964. At the same time, Britten controversially left his longtime publishers, Boosey and Hawkes, for the younger firm of Faber, launching their music division with Curlew River. Having now arrived at the period of the work's premiere, we may now shift to a consideration of the dramatic and musical construction of Curlew River. The heightened language of Plumer's libretto is heavily reliant on a presentational style of delivery, an epic narrative. Lines are continually repeated with contrasting verb tenses. The ensemble of monks functions as a Greek chorus, stepping in and out of the action in order to comment on it. Now, as the tailor Ian Bostridge has noted, the various types of narrative repetition in Curlew River amplify our awareness of its ritualistic experience. Scholar Daniel Albright likens this piece to a theater of the preterite, a theater of the past tense, where the audience observes the conclusion of a remote plot amid an abstracted sense of time. Now, in developing his musical material around this text, Britten's approach is both economical and evocative. The work begins and ends with that plain song chant, Te lucis ante terminum, to translate just the first stanza, "To thee before the close of day, creator of the world, we pray that with thy wonted favor thou wouldst be our guard and keeper now." And as Britten states in his note, from this fundamental melody with its stepwise motion, frequent turns and repetition, he derives the entire substance of the score. He expands, contracts, fragments, and compounds the chant material into a vast sonic tapestry. And throughout Curlew River, Britten avoids any semblance of regular musical meter, giving the music lines a highly organic sensibility. And the vocal lines rely on an elevated declamatory style, evoking the free contours of medieval chant and monody. This means a highly fluid musical texture, something Britten had likened to the sensation of constant floating. He establishes this convention gently at the opening of the piece. A series of repetitive drum statements and a freely shifting series of chord progressions on the organ support the opening speech of the abbot, leader of the monks. The effect is that of a very free style of recitative, and once established, it grows more elaborate. Now, previously, Britten experimented with what musicologist Peter Evans calls non-alignment in his music, basically allowing concurrent musical ideas to develop and elapse at their own pace. This is connected to the concept of heterophony, where identical or almost identical musical ideas are presented in simultaneous variation that is consciously inexact. Britten introduces this technique when the monks join the abbot in exhorting the congregation to pray for the souls of those who fall by the wayside. And the score builds on this principle with intense variety. The effect might sometimes appear chaotic, but one look at the score confirms that every note is deliberately conceived. What's more, the score relies heavily on ostinato techniques, short, repeated musical figures that are layered into larger textures. Now, there is a catch for the performers. The exact sequence of repetitions is rarely notated, nor is it cued by a conductor. Instead, the performers must listen and link up at key checkpoints in the music in order to move forward. Britten flagged these in the score with the famous Curlew sign, 2 inverted curves in the shape of a bird. What all this demands from the performers is, to hearken back to Britten's program note, an intensity of concentration and knowledge of the entire musical work. The model is very much that of chamber music, with the individual and the group in a collective sense of unity. And this is especially true in the large group scenes, such as when the pilgrims confront the madwoman at the river, their journey across the Curlew, and the later threnody before the shrine. Now, Britten's approach to the orchestration of Curlew River features an economy of means greater than any he employed in his preceding dramatic works. There are only 7 players: flute, doubling piccolo, horn, viola, double bass, harp, percussion, and chamber organ. Throughout, Britten requires the performance to use a range of extended techniques, notably slides from one note to the other and extremes of register. And several instruments are linked to specific characters: the solemn organ with the monks, the rippling and braying horn with the ferryman, the weary double bass and harp with the traveler, and the virtuoso flute with the madwoman. And as was his practice, Britten scored the work according to the specific talents of his regular roster of collaborators. The instrumental parts for Curlew River were written with members of the fabled Mellos ensemble in mind: Richard Adeney on flute, Neil Sanders on horn, Cecil Aronowitz on viola, Ocean Ellis on harp, and James Blade on percussion. And the group provided the chamber orchestra contingent for Britten's War Requiem, including the performances that opened the same festival that Curlew River premiered at. And completing the septet was Stuart Newson, principal double bass of the London Symphony Orchestra, and Philip Ledger, organist and later choirmaster of King's College, Cambridge. And for his vocalists, Britten's roster was equally rich and familiar to him. The role of the Mad Woman was written with the voice and acting of Britten's partner Peter Pears in mind. And the identification of the Mad Woman with the flute was a nod to Pears's role as Francis Flute in Midsummer Night's Dream, when Flute also appears in drag as the Maiden Thisbe in the play within a play at the end of the opera. And both are allusions to the mad scene in Donizetti's Lucia di Lammermoor and its obbligato flute part. Glass harmonica for those who know the original scoring. Now, supporting Pears was Brian Drake, a veteran of several Britten projects, including Billy Budd, in the role of the traveler, and also a talented newcomer, John Shirley Quirk, as the ferryman, beginning an association with Britten that would last until the composer's death. And Pears, Drake, and Shirley Quirk would also all play principal roles in the other church parables. And supervising the production was director Colin Graham, who stayed with Britten while the composer was hard at work on the score in Venice. And this enabled the staging concept to emerge organically with the music. Hoping to prevent any undue appropriation, Britten intentionally forbade Graham to experience or investigate no drama at any length, insisting instead on a unique movement vocabulary for the piece. In this effort, Graham was assisted by Claude Chagrin, movement coach at the National Theatre in London. And Graham's extensive production notes were printed by Faber to accompany the rented editions of the score. These give further insight into the style of performance and how audiences should be acclimated to it. He writes, "The movement and production details should be as sparse and economical as possible. The miming, which plays an integral part, is symbolic and should be pared down to its quintessence. And once the spectator becomes geared to the convention, his emotions are imperceptibly but passionately involved in a drama doubly distilled by the very economy of its theatrical means. Such involvement can be shattered by a single uncontrolled, weak, or unnecessary gesture. Every movement of the hand or every tilt of the head should assume immense meaning, and although formalized, must be designed and executed with the utmost intensity. This requires enormous concentration on the part of the actor, and almost yoga-like muscular as well as physical control." Graham's scenic design opted for abstract simplicity with minimal props and a raised circular playing space, adjoined by the musicians' platform and various ramps, akin to those of no drama. The costumes by Anina Stubbs evoked stylized medieval models, as did the masks used for the principal characters. Again, a conjoining of medieval practices with no conventions. And it is worth here considering the words of seminal Britten scholar Philip Brett about the diffuse but palpable connection to Asian models overall. This church parable engages with the music of Asia on terms that are not at all patronizing because they put so much of Western musical history at risk in an attempt at a genuine relationship that acknowledges and celebrates difference. Britten's grounding of his work musically in Western chant and dramatically in the English mystery play provides the basis for a clear-headed reinterpretation of and homage to Eastern conventions. And the process of exchange and synthesis in Curlew River likewise aligns with a larger global phenomenon in the post-war era of fusing disparate theatrical traditions together to effect a more self-conscious form of storytelling. And this is most famously associated with Bertolt Brecht and his theater of alienation or estrangement, but it aligns well with Britten's goal of bringing audiences to a higher level of alertness and investment. Now, with a fairly steady cast of alternates, the English opera group regularly revived Curlew River and toured with all the church parables across Britain, Europe, and Canada from 1964 onwards, even going as far as Australia. The United States premiere took place in June 1966 at the Caramore Festival, but outdoors at the Spanish courtyard of Rosenhaus. And luckily for posterity, Britten's partnership with Decca Records meant that all the church parables were recorded under his personal supervision with all his original principals and instrumentalists. Now, as the other side of this introductory journey nears, we should endeavor to situate Curlew River within the larger trajectory of Britten's career and British operatic and theatrical life. Reviewing the premiere, critic William Mann famously postulated that the project might signal the most important stage of Britten's creative life. And in a sense, this was true. Curlew River was the 11th completed dramatic work, can be seen in the musical language and theatrical conventions of the remaining two church parables, the television opera Owen Wingrave, Britten's last full-length opera Death in Venice, and even the dramatic cantata Phaedra, written for Dame Janet Baker in 1975. Also in Curlew River, we encounter something that is truly rare in Britten's works, a female, or at least female-identifying protagonist, and one who is a mother. Preceding the madwoman in the former category are Lucretia in The Rape of Lucretia and the Queen in Gloriana. Mothers in leading roles are far rarer in Britain, and we may look to Ellen Orford in Peter Grimes, the governess in The Turn of the Screw, and Titania in Midsummer Night's Dream for maternal models. And I'll give a less than honorable mention to the always drunken Mrs. Noah in Noah's Flood. The only other example would be Phaedra, too, in the cantata of the same name. The gender conventions of the madwoman role also prompt a broader reflection on the function of parents and parental figures in Britten's works. When these characters are substantial to the narrative, they are more often than not menacing, as with the violent Peter Grimes as surrogate parent to his apprentices in The Turn of the Screw, the malevolent Quint in Miss Jessel, or the manipulative Wingraves and Mrs. Julian in Owen Wingrave. Yet it is the compassion in the treatment of the madwoman that imbues the role with a transformative quality. Such care makes the madwoman stand out amongst the entire cast of Britten's dramatic characters, operas or not. And looking backward from the premiere, Curlew River shows the extent to which Britten continually sought out new forms of dramatic expression. One sees larger dramatic projects continually alternating with smaller scale ventures, always with a drive for innovation. After the success of the relatively grand Peter Grimes in 1945, for instance, Britten turned to what he called chamber opera with The Rape of Lucretia in 1947. The same can be said of the intimate psychology of Turn of the Screw, which followed the epic historical canvases of Billy Budd and Gloriana. And we can certainly see how Curlew River serves as a more sober pendant to the ethereal impishness and play-within-a-play conventions of Midsummer Night's Dream. More potent, however, is the connection to the major score that immediately preceded Curlew River, and arguably the most ambitious work in Britten's entire catalog, the War Requiem, composed for a large orchestra and chorus, chamber ensemble, 3 vocal soloists, children's choir, and organ. Now, to borrow from the 19th century conductor Hans von Bülow, as much as the Verdi Requiem is an opera in ecclesiastical dress, Britten's War Requiem is postmodern music theater in post-war vestments. While the War Requiem is not ostensibly an opera, its ritualistic elements, juxtapositions of sound worlds, and use of English poetry with the text of the Latin Mass for the Dead show it to be a profoundly dramatic work, a church parable of a different kind. We also have the same sense of Christian spirituality that is unique to Britten. And this topic naturally begs an interrogation of Britten's religious beliefs, a topic too big to cover here in great length. While raised in the Anglican tradition and a regular setter of religious texts, Britten's own faith remains something deeply interior and somewhat inscrutable. One may contemplate how spiritual beliefs manifest in the dramatic works, whether the ironic background church music of the hypocritical Burra in Peter Grimes, or the more overt Christian patina of redemption that Britten and librettist Ronald Duncan interpolated into The Rape of Lucretia. And the church parables present an altogether different riddle, with a consistent backdrop of remote and generalized Christianity. The monks who enact the parable, we are never given their exact denomination, for instance. However, such ambiguity is an essential part of their function as modernist parables. Through story and music, a moral and message may emerge, but not in a strict or overt fashion. We may conclude by confronting 2 questions I posed at the beginning. Is this really an opera? And what is Curlew River really about? And the early reception history of Curlew shows critics also struggling to figure out what the piece is, despite their general admiration for Britten's music and the ambition of the work. Thankfully, opera is a term so liberally used and abused that it can be stretched as far as we like. To answer the second question, we should not lose sight of the piece's genre subtitle, a parable for church performance. Britten always wished for his works to be useful, and as a parable, Curlew River forces the audience to confront its unique lessons, not just about the notions of tolerance, faith, and family, but also the process and possibilities of theatrical experience. For Britten, this preoccupation meant continual innovation, always trying to reach the other side of the river, one might say. And as Britten wrote to his younger contemporary, Peter Maxwell Davies, "I was extremely pleased that you liked Curlew River. It was extremely difficult to do, to write and perform, and I'm not sure we've all together solved all of the problems. But I wanted to do it, and I'm determined to make the next one much better." Thank you. It's my pleasure to have joining me on stage Christopher Hahn, General Director of Pittsburgh Opera, and I think to start with, on behalf of everyone here and every patron of Pittsburgh Opera, thank you for a fantastic 26 years in the leadership of Pittsburgh Opera.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is this working? Do I have to do something? Steve, what do I have to do?
See if this one works. This one works. We'll trade you out.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh.
Hello, hello.
Yes.
Oh, yes. the ecclesiastical echo that we all know and love. Thank you very much. It seems inconceivable that it was only 26 years ago that I came in the summer of 2000. And in fact, one of the first places I came was right here. And I'd come from LA, and I didn't quite know what I had done by accepting this position, and I found the fellowship at this church particularly welcoming, to say nothing of an extraordinarily exquisite music tradition, which in one of those things that Pittsburgh is connected only to people away from everyone else we know in the world. It turns out that the organist had played, was the organist at the church of an extremely good friend in Berkeley, All Souls Berkeley, and here he was, and he had been well trained. So this was a wonderful home for me to find when I first came to Pittsburgh.
Excellent. And we also have you to thank for really bringing Britten into Pittsburgh Opera's repertory. You were the first to insist that we do a Britten opera, which I was very surprised to find out yesterday. Was in 2003, Midsummer Night's Dream, followed by Turn of the Screw in '05, Billy Budd in '06, and 2010 and in 2010, The Rape of Lucretia. And now with Curlew River in 2026, you're giving, unless anyone here has anecdotal evidence to the contrary, the first premiere ever in Pittsburgh of, the first performances ever in Pittsburgh of Curlew River, which is also to be commended.
Well, thank you. So, but there was a selfish part of all of this. So I need to tell you a little story. So when I had just arrived, in 2000, before I'd actually taken over officially, people had known I'd been announced as a new person, and I think I was attending the last production of my predecessor, Tito's regime. And I must have said grand things in the various press releases, and isn't it funny that my successor is now making grand statements in press releases about what he will be doing? So the cycle continues, and an elderly gentleman stomped up to me on the sidewalk in front of the Benedum, and already angry, and I'd never sort of met him before, he said, well, if you ever do anything by Benjamin Britten, I'll leave. So
Apoplexia.
I thought, oh dear. So I promptly programmed Midsummer Night's Dream and the rest. Not to get back at him, but to try to prove to this community and this audience that this composer was so worth considering, not only considering, but delving into. Mm-hmm. I'm realizing that as we're contemplating all of these things, how as a boy chorister, which I was, in the Anglican tradition, there were great parallels in my own sort of growth and exploration. And as a kid, I sang Britten music. I remember singing it when I was a boy soprano, and I remember his Beggar's Opera. Mm-hmm. I think I was told to sing something from that. The War Requiem, when it came out, was an extraordinary experience, through recordings. But I was aware as an early teenager of the formation of the English opera group in Aldeburgh. It sounded very revolutionary, and what was going on over in the far east of the country. And so when I got myself to England, which I did from South Africa in the mid-'70s, I managed to get myself to Aldeburgh, and I've actually been in the church that St. Bartholomew's, which is teensy-tiny. I mean, it's literally about the size of the chancel, and continue to absorb this extraordinary spirit of Britten. He talks about the fens. I don't know if you've ever been to Essex. It's extremely cold and gloomy and gray and misty and smelly because there are lots of bogs and the marsh gas rises up. The perfect setting for many of his very strange operas. But the big kicker is the best fish and chip shop in the United Kingdom is in Aldeburgh, where you need it because it's the one bright, perky thing you can have.
I was told that exact same phrase not 2 days ago by a friend who works and teaches and writes in Europe. Had you gotten to Aldeburgh just after Britten had passed, or was it? He
had already passed away.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you have the chance to meet Peter Pears at all while you were there?
I did not, but I heard him sing in London. And I also realize now that you mentioned Philip Ledger. Philip Ledger, as you said, was the fairly long time organist and choir master for King's College Chapel, which another choir that I think all of us involved in that kind of music worship and have worship from afar, and as a kid would listen to the 9 Lessons and Carols, radio, et cetera, et cetera. He was reigning at the time when I got to my first King's College choir experience, which was the Ash Wednesday service at King's College, when they sing the Allegri Miserere, if they have a boy who can do it, and they did. And Philip Ledger, my first, I'm sure you can, but I'm running on ahead. My first live experience of Curlew River was in Cambridge, in a tiny parish church, and the cast were largely choristers from King's College choirs, the men's choir, and I'm trying to remember now, but I'm pretty sure it was all under the direction of Philip Ledger.
Oh, so there's a real imprimatur there and a real excellent continuity.
Exactly.
I know that Curlew River has been on your bucket list, wish list for a long time. How did it eventually make it on the docket for this season? And with that, opera is always difficult, but what particular challenges does this piece give to a general director?
Right. Yes. So I have been obsessed with this piece for a very long time, even since being a child and being a stage director in training. And as you mentioned, the entire production scheme is printed in the libretto. So when I first met Colin Graham, which I did in San Francisco, he directed a world premiere of Dangerous Liaison. So I spent quite a lot of time with him. Brilliant director, erudite, funny. And I asked him about the original production, and he told me various stories about how difficult it was. I was so invested in his notes about the production that as a young stage director, I realized I couldn't imagine doing it in any other way, which is either a great compliment to him or I felt was detrimental to my own ingenuity and creativity. I talked about that, and he said, "Oh, don't be silly, boy. You know, it was just a guide. It was a guide. I'm sure you do just fine." And I started to try to do a production in San Francisco. It didn't work out. When I came here, once I figured out that this church has a wonderful men's choir, I tried to pull together an amalgam, a greater collaboration where we would use the men's choir and artists from Pittsburgh Opera. We didn't really have the right combination, and that was early days, and although money is always tight, I couldn't make it work in the budget. Someone on my staff found a finance committee minutes when I was going on, I think in about 2007, about wanting to do this production and trying to find the money, but I clearly didn't. So then, in a selfish mode, I can't remember, somebody said something about when I was talking about my final season, and I thought to myself, Curlew River, if I don't do it now, that's it. So we pulled it together. But I did want to say it is extremely complicated to do, and my dear and wonderful music director, Anthony Walker, kind of nearly fainted with delight about the idea of doing it, and then said, "Oh my word," because as you described, the compositional method, which was born out of the piece, but also the fact that the musical ensemble were already an ensemble who worked together all the time. So we've all seen string quartets or small chamber pieces where there's no conductor, and that's fine because they work together so much that they know each other's rhythms and breathings, et cetera, et cetera. And, as we said, St. Bartholomew's in Aldborough is teensy-tiny, so it's a lot easier to stay connected when you're very in close physical proximity. So the one concession we've made is that Anthony Walker is actually conducting very minimally, very carefully, but really leading it because we have to put the instrumentalist right there and the performers are right here. And I said, no video monitors. We have to be in the poor theater mode. This has to be candlelight, no video screens, no super titles, sorry. We're going to hand out a libretto. Do your study. Let's go back to the 60s and 70s when we used to study before we went to the opera because we didn't know what the hell was going to go on. It is in English, but this is a church, and guess what? The reverb is fantastic, but it muddies diction. So, we will, that is a concession, to have a printed libretto and candlelight and no curtain calls, no fancy stuff, just the piece.
Excellent. And that ties in with an interesting fact, and various people pointed this out, that while Britten did this turn to chamber opera to, enable opera to tour, to be more accessible, he didn't compensate by making it any less complex. And in many ways, things like the church parables are very involved, but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing for opera.
No, indeed. I think he was starting to introduce a whole different way of having performers listen to each other.
Yep.
Which desperately was needed and necessary because it's a very complex compositional style.
Yes. I think we have about 10 minutes left. I think we can now open it up to questions from the audience, if anyone has anything for either of us.
Will we be using the entire center aisle? Well, I suppose I can give away some secrets. Basically, yeah. Well, yes, although visually the focus is up here. But we talked about the procession. The procession comes from right back there, as is intended, and proceeds all the way through. But then through the action, the entrance of a character, two characters, we use the aisle, but try to get them up here fast enough. But the notion is to utilize this extraordinary space where sound precedes visual contact. And it's part of the poorness of, I think, of what, because I'm obsessed by Peter Brook and that great move of poor theater in the 60s and 70s, that this is stripped down to absolutely its essential components.
I was at the rehearsal yesterday, and I'm not paid to say this, but this is a very special experience. And so if you haven't already purchased tickets, Pittsburgh Opera's website has them all, because it's not every day that you get something that is really 360 degrees, totally three-dimensional, and intentionally immersive that way.
Yes, and because we're avoiding fancy things, our sightlines are a little compromised because action takes place here, and as you get further back, it's going to be not so simple. So don't come and complain to me about sightlines. Just come early, so you can sort of get a view. But it is, and there's seating on the sides too, so there'll be some compromise there. Yeah.
Other questions?
So the members, the musicians, the orchestra members, they're going to process. So are they going to be carrying their instruments?
Well, I thought about that, but the harp is a little heavy to carry. And the percussion, oh my word. But I know what you mean. Yes, so we're actually giving the musicians a choice if they are so wedded to their instrument, as many of them are, carry it. If you can't carry it, carry a lantern instead or candle. We will go through the usual tuning situation, which may not have happened in a medieval church, but probably really did happen for the first performances of Curlew River, because everything has to be tuned to the organ. And that's a whole complicated thing, because the organ, God bless it, is housed in this building, and guess what? This building gets cold in the winter. Guess what happens to organs when they get cold? They start lowering their tune. They don't go out of tune, but we're having to match the tuning of the instruments to the organs. So that will take place as usual, but then they'll disassemble and disappear and appear in the nave.
And I remember from the production instructions for the original, some individuals did enter with their instruments if they were small. For those who couldn't carry it, like harp or organ, they just carried their music in. And actually, in the second church parable, the burning fiery furnace, there's a big elaborate procession that the musicians do through the church. And again, those who really can't carry instruments like the organist, they play little finger cymbals. Though Ocean Ellis, there's a fascinating documentary about the recording sessions for Burning Fiery Furnace. It's available on YouTube, and I highly recommend it. He has portable harp is not the right word, but a smaller harp that he has lashed to him that he's able to play. And they had to do that whole sequence of the score, I think about 8 to 10 times to get the timing just right. And this was, of course, in the glorious days of stereophonic opera recording, also part of that tradition.
So we must work on my successor about a production.
Yeah, Burning Fiery Furnace, Prodigal Son,
coming.
Then you take them all out on tour.
But this was a refreshing time back in the 60s when musicians' unions were probably not quite so elaborately involved. And so I have to say we had to do some fast talking about letting our musicians know that they would be processing, because there's nothing in the CBA that says they should. So. But they've been very accommodating and have wanted very much to jump into this as wholeheartedly as the whole company has. The music staff have done the most extraordinary job preparing it. It does the sort of 3 or 4 main roles are extraordinary. Our cast is amazing. We told them up front that. You must prepare as though there is no conductor. The conductor will be there, but you must know absolutely everything, every sound, every pitch that you can possibly absorb. And so Logan Wagner, our tenor, and I'll have a little digression here because Peter Pears was a very illustrious tenor, but in my humble estimation did not have a particularly beautiful voice. He had
you wouldn't be the first to observe that.
There was a lot of commentary from critics in England about that. It was very dramatically effective. He knew how to wield it, but it was not beautiful. And Logan, on the other hand, has this extraordinarily beautiful voice, and he wields it like a wonderful instrument. And he said to me, well, they told me I had to know everything, so believe you me, I've internalized the score. I know absolutely every note, every pitch, every nuance. So if there is no conductor, if he faints or disappears, I'm good. Thank you.
I was thinking yesterday during the rehearsal that Logan's voice very much reminds me of, there are two recordings of Curlew River, Britten's and then another one done by Sir Neville Mariner in the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. And Philip Langridge sings on that one, and it's I would say just as you said, it's there's much more beauty in that voice. Though we don't want to speak poorly of Pears, who again, as you said, it was a very agile voice and very declamatory.
Right.
So it was good for certain aspects of Britten's work, especially. So
and if you have time and you go and listen to his tone, because then you get an idea of how and why the Mad Woman sounds, the composition of that character sounds the way it does with the declamation, because Peter Pears was so good at that.
Mm-hmm. And the opera is only about 70 minutes long. With the experience, with the work. Sorry, I don't want to. It's always these questions about genre.
It's only 70 minutes long.
Yes.
We're not trying to torture you for 80 minutes or 90 minutes, just 70 minutes.
Yeah. Though I did have the thought that this is, I don't know, oddly a unique spiritual experience in music drama in a work compared with a work which couldn't be more different, Wagner's Parsifal, but in its ability to kind of subsume you into this wholly unique sense of dramatic time and leave you to contemplation, though not with all the Wagnerian trappings.
Right. It is an extraordinary piece, as you've said so eloquently, but allow yourself, and I think you said this to your students, before you come, Give yourself a period of quiet reflection and contemplation. You actually have to prepare yourself because I don't think you will ever have heard anything like it. You might have heard a recording, but hearing this piece in this space, I believe will be a unique experience for everyone in the audience. And so give yourself the breath and the grace to do that. Live busy lives, we rush in, we rush out, where are we now, maid curtain, where am I? No, just for this one, don't do that.
And
benefit yourself, yeah.
And that's part of the work's significance in a festival environment, which is deliberately designed to extract us from the rigors of the everyday. I know that, actually, to bring it briefly back to Parsifal, when San Francisco was promoting it, one of their social media ads said, "In a world of 15-second videos, Wagner's Parsifal asks for something radical, your time." And that really, I think, speaks about something that is so beautiful about these works, that we can unplug, and as always, silence your personal devices before you come into the space. That allows us that ability to invest in something greater and
Indeed.
special.
So we're thrilled that we're doing it. We do hope that you get from it what you can and you will, and that it'll be part of everybody's musical journey. And it's not just a musical journey, but it's an experience because it's extraordinary. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes.
I will hope to see you at the performances. Thank you so much, Ryan. You were
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you.